Hiya everyone, welcome back to a new tutorial. It's a little bit later than I wanted this to go up, but we've had Christmas obviously and everything else. I've also caught some sort of head cold, so bear with me. I am going to try my best to get through without coughing at you. But this is for the Carnation tutorial. If you follow the community tab on my YouTube page, you will have seen this go up. I'm doing a series of birth month flowers, and this is mine. This is January. I've literally just had a birthday a few days ago, and this is the flower for the months of January, so Capricorn season and all that. So this is what we're doing. I will put a link to the line art down in the description for you. I've got my line art drawn out already. I have lightened it up just with my kneadable eraser. I just rolled over and lightened up the line art. This is going to be very simple. It looks quite complicated, the carnation, but this is going to be quite easy if you just follow along. Obviously, being a YouTube video, you can pause if there's anything and rewind if there's anything you're not too sure about. But it is, trust me, nice and simple. It's not as difficult as it looks. There's a few layers, but other than that, not too difficult. Not too many colours either. This is what I've got on my palette. So we have got Permanent Rose. I have got Quinacridone Red, a very watered down version of Quinacridone Red. I have got Permanent Sap Green. I've got Windsor Lemon, and I've got a mix of the two here. And I've got a little bit of Prussian Blue to darken up some of the green that we're going to be doing. I'm going to begin with the stems of the flower, and we're going to move on in layers. We'll add some to the flowers. You'll see what I mean. I'm going to go in layers. So I've got just two, nice and easy, two brushes. I've got a number 6. This is a Daler & Rowney Aquafine round in number 6. And I've got my little detailed spotter brush. So for any little details and things. And like I said, to begin, we will start on the stems and work our way up to the flowers. Now to begin this, if you look at the carnation, I will put a reference picture up on the screen as well. On the joints of the flower, there's these little nodules on the joints where the leaves kind of come out and where they turn into the actual flower buds. And this is what we're going to be doing first. So I'm going to wet my brush down. And I'm going to take some of the Windsor Lemon. And I'm just going to add a little touch of water because I don't want it too strong. And just where the joints are, I'm going to add a touch of that Windsor Lemon. So everywhere where these little joints are kind of meeting, I'm just going to add a touch. And I'm going to do it in stages like this because I think it's easier to follow if we do it this way, rather than doing a whole stem and then moving on to the next one. So everywhere where there's joints, don't worry too much about where it's going, as long as it's going where these little leaves and these joints, these little kind of nodules are. So everywhere where you can see those little nodules, just add a little bit of that Windsor Lemon. And I'm going to rinse off my brush. And now I'm going to pick up some of this mix of the two. That's the Windsor Lemon and the Permanent Sap Green. And I'm going to take that down every stem. So I think the carnation can look a lot more difficult than it is. And also put some of this on the leaves. There's not many leaves on this one. The actual flower itself is quite frilly, and I think the most difficult part of it, to be honest, is probably drawing it, because it is so kind of frilly. It's easy to get lost, but hopefully you can follow the line art that I've provided there. And to be honest with you, I mean, it's so frilly, it doesn't really matter if you go wrong with the frills. Nobody's going to know, you know. So just add this to the stems, and this will be our first layer of colour. Also to the leaves. And also on the base of the flowers and buds. So that little cup that the flower sits in and that the bud sits in, we're also going to add some in there as well. So on all of this, I'm just going to add a touch of water. So this part is fairly easy, really. Sorry if you can hear my dog in the background there. She's decided to wake up at the most inopportune time. So there, that's our first layer on. That was quite easy, wasn't it? Just make sure you've covered all the white kind of sections there. Okay, I'm going to rinse off my brush. And now I'm going to take my detail brush and I wet it down. And I'm going to pick up some of this permanent sap green on its own. And now what we're going to do is just below these joints. So let me just try and show you what I'm going to do here. So we've got this joint here that we put the lemon on. Okay, just under the joint, we're going to add just a touch of the darker green, and then rinse off your brush and just using a damp brush, I'm going to blend it slightly in both directions, like that, and take some tiny bit more of that, and I'm going to carry the dark colour down the centre of the stem. Okay, now I'm also going to carry it up the centre of the, I don't know what to call that, it's almost, it's like, well, it's a nodule, isn't it, really? So this is just the first layer, so we're going to put more layers on after this. We get a touch more of that green, and I'm going to come up to the next joint, and I'm going to go just underneath the joint, like that. I'm going to rinse my brush off, and I'm just going to blend that out a little touch, and I'm going to get some more, and here we are going to add a touch of that darker green to those two tiny little leaves that are coming just out there. So just the tips of those, like that. And rinse off again. And I'm just going to blend that dark colour over the lemon that we previously put on there. Like so. And we're going to carry on doing this all the way around. So on every little nodule, like this one here, and this one here, this one here, I'm just going to take some of that darker sap green. Let me show you on this one here. I'm going to go on the tip of this yellow part, a little touch underneath, and a little touch underneath. There's another one here, see, and a little touch under there, and then rinse off before it dries too much. Blend those out. Just remember to rinse off and blend. And blend it into that yellow that we already put on there. Okay, like so. Take some more. And coming up to this part, now this is almost a shape there. Okay, now we're going to go around the edge of that whole shape with the dark colour. And there's a little tiny leaf to the side there, the other one is hidden. And we're going to go up the edge of this little one here, and then just on the bottom of the stem there. And then rinse and repeat, same thing. Rinse off, and I'm just going to blend that in to the yellow. Just soften it all up. Oh, cat's come to visit me now. I'm going to move down to this one here now. So take some more of the dark green. And on this one, we have got a leaf that's kind of hiding, sort of twisted behind the stem. And that is going to be dark. So we are going to more or less do the whole of that with the dark green. And then we're going to come down the edge of that little nodule. And we are going to come up this side of the little nodule with the dark green. And then the very tip and the edges there. Add a touch in the middle there as well. I'm going to rinse off. And again, I'm going to soften that and blend that into the yellow and the green colour that we already layered on. Okay. And now on this stem, we're going to put some darker green underneath the little nodule. And then just as we did up here, down the centre, not all the way, about 3/4 of the way down. I'm going to rinse off and blend out. Just to soften it all up. Now we've got a leaf here, and that is quite dark as well, so I'm going to add the dark green all over the surface of this leaf. Like so. And then on this one, we're going to start at the tip and come down one side. And follow that round that nodule there. And then we're going to come down the centre as well. Not quite to follow the shape around. And then I'm going to rinse out and blend that in to soften that up. And then a tiny touch more just down the edge. And just soften that in. We want this side to be darker than this side. In fact, I'm going to add, I think, just a touch more on that side there. And that does in fact come around there, so I've missed a bit there. That leaf actually comes down further there, like that, and then that nodule comes around there, and then a darker section underneath. And I'm just rinsing out my brush and I'm just tapping it off on my cloth there, so it's not too wet, to soften the green into the yellows and greens that we already laid down. There we go, like so. So that's almost one stem done. Okay, we're going to take some more of that green and we're going to put a little centre line down that stem there. And then this leaf here, I'm going to come up one side like this. And then again, rinsing off my brush, taking off the excess water, and we'll just blend and soften that colour in so that the darkness is just on one side. So one side's got a very crisp dark line and the other is soft. Okay, so I'm going to take some more of the dark green, and coming up here I've missed a little bud. Now I'm going to take the dark green up one side like so, and then just in between I suppose they're like little leaves that are forming a little cup underneath the bud, and then just down that side like so, and touch more there. I'm just going to come back in and soften that all up. So we've got a nice blend of colour. Okay, so that's more or less this stem with its first few layers on. This stem here, we need to do this part here and then the cup under this one. So we're almost done with that one. So take a little bit more of that dark green. Now there's a little nodule and a leaf here that's kind of got a little bit lost. So we'll put that back in. So it's just literally there. And that's a little touch of green underneath. And then up here you can barely see because it's become behind the bloom of the flower. I'm just going to darken the tip down both sides there, and then it kind of disappears behind there. Rinse off again. I'm just going to soften that in, and up here, get a nice blend, and just there on the stem as well. So we've done that part there. We've got this little one left here, so I'll take some more. And this one is quite dark on this edge here. So we're just breaking it down into tones really, the dark and the light tones. So let me see, where am I? Okay, on the tip of this is quite dark. On both tips of that actually. And then in the centre there, and then just where it meets that opening of the little one underneath there, small darkness there, rinse off and give that a blend. If you feel like you're picking up too much of the dark when you're trying to blend, just rinse your brush off again. A bit on the rag. I've got a rag, you can use kitchen roll. I've just got a rag that I use for all of my painting. So just blending that out, like so. And that's our first kind of stem that way completed. And I'm just going to repeat the process onto the rest of the stems. And then after that, I'm going to put the same colour with some details onto these cups. I'm calling them cups. There has to be a proper name for them, but I'm not a plant person, so I don't know. I should learn them really, shouldn't I? So we're going to put some details, once we've done these bits, we're going to put some details onto these cups. I've completely missed one there. I'll have to come back and do that one. And then we're going to, as that's drying, we are going to come back in with slightly darker, because it's watercolour, we're working from lights to darks. So we're going to mix up a little bit of the Prussian blue with the green to make it slightly darker. And we're just going to touch in a few of the areas. And then the stems are done. It's as simple as that. So pick up some more of this dark green. I'm going to work down the bottom here on this one. So we've got quite a dark one on this side, and then we've got just a tip, as it were, there, and then a little dark section underneath, and then coming up to where this little cup, I'm just going to call it a cup, guys, because I really don't know what the technical name for it is. And on this little cup we're going to darken the sides and the point there. And we're going to do that on both of the little edges, and then we're going to come down one side of the edge of this one here. I'm just going to darken, that's almost all dark, that side there, and down the edge there. I'm going to rinse off, take off the excess water, and blend that out into our previous layers. And the same down here, soften that and blend that. Like so. A little more. And this one, it's the tippy tip. It's got a very fine dark tip to this leaf. And then right down the centre is dark. And then coming up the stem next to it, we've got a dark edge, and then we've got another dark joint and leaf there. So I'm going to rinse off. We don't want to put too many details on without blending, so just stop at any point if you're worried and blend. Leaving the tip of that one quite dark, although we are going to come back in with some darker green and blend this one out. Like so. Take a touch more, and we are going to add some dark underneath this next joint here, and then on the very edge of these two tiny little leaves here, and to the base of that little joint there, and also run some down the edge of that stem. And I'm going to rinse off. Soften that all up. Like so. And finally, for this little one, we are going to come up to that diamond shape that is made in the middle there, and then some down the centre, and then we want some just on the outer tips. I'm sure you can see the pattern. They're all the same kind of, got the same kind of shading on them. And then I'm just going to blend and soften. If you don't feel like it's moving much, just take some more water, take off the excess, and come back. Don't be afraid. I've softened all that up, like so. And we've now got these two stems left. So I'm going to pick up some more of that dark colour. And coming up to this little joint here, I've got some dark underneath. And on the tips of those tiny little leaves. And then just down the bottom of these stems. And one side of this stem. I'm going to come back in. And, oops, don't do that. Classic mistake. When you're picking up the water, don't let it do that, which is what I've just done, which is why I've got my cloth here. So take off the excess water. So it's not the end of the world. You can just mop it up like you've just seen me do. It's really not the end of the world, but try not to let the water go up the bottom of your brush like that, or that's what's going to happen. But it's fixable. Soften that green into that stem. Just at the bottom there. And working our way up. And we'll come up with this one first. We'll add some dark just under that little joint there. And let me see. Okay. We're going to come up. It's not very dark. Gradually watering it down as I'm picking up water. Okay, to that edge there. And to that edge there. And then we've got this little part underneath. And I'm going to come back in and soften and blend that in. Like so. And the final one we've got a tiny little dark leaf almost hiding around the back there. And then we've got one here, so just going to come down one side of that. A little bit of darkness there on the stem underneath. And then coming up here, we've got a little bit of darkness there. And then to one side. And to the tip of this one. And just down the edge a little bit there. And then, just as we've done with the rest, I'm just going to soften and blend all that in. Like so. Now, before I forget, I am just going to come back in to this one that I've missed, I'm going to add some of that mix of green on there. I don't know how I managed to miss that one, but I did. And there we go, that is our stems with 1, 2, almost 3 layers of detail on. And I'm going to pause for a second and just let this part here dry, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to mix, when we come back, let's move the palette over so you can see, I'm going to mix up a little bit of the permanent sap green with the Prussian blue, just to give only a tiny, we're only going to add a tiny bit of Prussian blue, just to give us a darker value here, to put some more dark details on. Before we do that, we're going to take a little bit more of this sap, permanent sap green, and we're going to add some details to the cups under the blooms. So they've got some tiny little lines and details like that on them. We're going to add some of those now. We might add a few darker ones after, but the main dark details are on these edges that we've darkened already, so it'll be easy to see where we're going to put that. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, I think we're more or less dry now. So coming back, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a touch of water to this permanent sap green. Not too much, you just want to make it flow a little bit better. Okay, now we need to add some details to these buds. I've missed another one there, look. Let me just fill that in, guys, sorry. I'm going to blame the head cold. Absolutely going to blame the head cold. And the snoring dog. I think what it was is I thought that was well, it is a bud, but I thought it was a flower bud. I'm not looking at the reference photo. That will teach me. Right, okay, let's try that again. Okay, so these are dry, this one's not, so we'll leave this one till last, but we can move on. So we need to add some details to these cups, to the blooms, as it were. And to do that, I'm going to take some of this watered down green, and I'm just following the shape of the bud, because this would have been a bud like this that's opened and the blooms come out, and there are more there, look. Okay, so just ignore me completely, because I've missed all the buds, apparently. And that one there. Okay, well, pretend that didn't happen. I'm not even going to edit that out. Okay, so we'll leave all of those till last. And we will start, where shall we start? Let's start with this one here. So I'm going to take some of this watered down dark green and just following the shape, which is slightly curved to the outside edge. I'm just going to start by putting in some of these little lines. Now we are going to come over with a glaze after, so these lines will be softened down somewhat, but we want them to absolutely be there because it all adds to the detail of the painting. So we're not going to do this one because it's wet, and we're not going to do this one because it's wet, so we'll do this one up here, and it's just the same on all of them. I'm barely touching the paper, and I'm just putting some of these lines on with my detail brush. Like so, and we'll do this one here, just following. It's almost a dry brush that I've got. I'm barely touching the paper to put these little tiny details in. And this one here, so curve them out slightly to to the edges, and then more straight up and down as you move to the middle section there, like so. So that's all the larger ones done. Now let me see, it should be okay to put these ones in. So these ones that are just buds, we're just going to follow the shape of the bud, putting those little tiny lines on there. Like so. There we go. So that didn't take too long, did it? And now what I'm going to do is just rinse and dry this for a second. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of water to my, just move this over so you can see, to my Prussian blue. I'm going to rinse that off, and now I'm just going to take a touch, literally a touch of that, and I'm going to mix that in with the permanent sap green. I'm going to do that again, so a little bit more, mix that in, and we want to keep adding the blue until we can see that it's darker, and I think that should be fine. Just rinse my brush off. And again, I'm taking my detailed brush, picking up some of that darker mix, and now where we put the darker colours on the previous layer, we're not going to cover them completely because that would be pointless. We're just going to add a touch of this darker green, and on some it's just going to be on the tips, like this one. I think we can go a little bit darker actually. I'm going to be brave and go a little bit darker because we do want the contrast. So let's try that. On this one, it's just going to be on the tip. That's better. Of this one. And down the centre of this one. And the outer edge. Again, I'm barely touching the paper with this tiny brush. So anywhere we put the darker green before, add a touch of this darker mix, just to pull out the details. So on this one, we put the darker mix there, and then we blended it down. So this time, we're not blending it, we are just adding in tiny details like that. Okay. And it might, because we're not blending it in, it might look quite stark at the moment. But like I said, we are going to come over with a glaze at the end, so it will all look a bit less harsh and contrasty. So here we're going to come right the way down that stem there, and then we've got this little dark leave behind. So I'm just going to add some to that there. And then coming up here, this, we should have made this dark before and didn't, so I'm going to ignore that fact and add it now. And here, this lovely diamond shape going on. Just to the very, very tip of that one there. And it's all about picking out these little details that you can see. So anywhere on the reference picture that looks particularly dark on these stems is where you're going to be adding these little details. So they stand out against the actual stems. Like so. Come down the stem with this one. And this one on the tip. Oh, hello, cat. Very vocal. It's night time, you need to go sleep. Does anyone else talk to their animals like they can understand? So, continuing on, just adding in these little dark parts. So it gives us a nice contrast between the light stem and these little cups and buds and things that are going on there. I think that is more or less as far as I want to go with that, with the darker parts. Maybe a little bit more down this edge. And what we're going to do at the end is we're going to put a really light glaze. I'm going to darken this up a touch more, and we're going to put a really watery glaze all over. And you'll see that it tones it all down, because at the moment it's looking quite bright. It will tone it all down nicely and give it a nice finish. Now, we can move on to the beautiful blooms of these flowers. Let me just rinse out my brush. Get rid of that for a second. I'm just swapping over my jars. Now, I like to keep two separate jars. This one, I've been rinsing off my brush, doing the greens. This one will be used for the pinks. So that's a good tip. Some people like a jar of clean and a jar to rinse off in, but I like to do it this way, so I just find it easier. Okay, so to start these lovely blooms off, make sure I've got my pad in the right place so you can see what I'm doing, because I've moved. There we go. Same principle. Okay, so to start these blooms off, what we're going to do is we're going to put a really light glaze all over using this really watered down quinacridone red. I've already added quite a lot of water to mine, so I've got a nice pale wash, and I'm hoping it's going to be pale enough. We'll soon find out. But just using my larger brush, all I'm going to do, I'll start with this one here because I think it's possibly the smaller of the blooms, and I'm just going to come over the whole. It's still a little bit dark, so I'm just going to add some water to my brush, and it will dry lighter, don't forget. And I'm literally going to come over the whole of the bloom with that lovely light pink wash. And if you feel, obviously it's very, very watered down, if you feel you've got too much on there, rinse off, take off the excess water, and then mop up if you feel you've got too much colour or any puddles forming, because we don't want any puddles forming. So there, we've got a nice light pink wash on the bud, and you can see that there. And now I know that I've got that wash too dark, I'm going to add a little touch more water. And I'm just going to continue filling in the rest of these blooms. And because it's such a lovely ruffled, jaggedy kind of flower, you don't need to worry too much about the edge. As long as it's kind of jaggedy, I wouldn't worry about sticking to the exact outline that we've drawn out. Just going to lift a little bit of that colour off because it's still a little bit too dark. We only want a really light wash of it, so if you feel you've gone too dark like I have, just lift some with a clean damp brush. Like so. That's two. Do this one. So we're just giving everything a nice uniform wash with a light pink colour that the quinacridone has given us. And it's a lovely pink, I do like the colour. And the last one, and I'm just going in with the tip of my brush to get around that little fluted edge, but I'm not worrying too much about following the exact outline. There we go, and I do feel like that one's a little bit darker than the others, so I'm just going to lift a little bit of that colour up. There we go. There we go. So now we need to let that dry for the next part, where we will be adding in some lovely permanent rose to give these flowers some colour. It's not difficult, it's just there's so many ruffles. You just need to watch where you're putting the colour. It's not as difficult as it looks. I mean, it does look like a complicated flower to draw and to paint, but it's really not. It's quite simple once you get the hang of it. And we're just going to come in with the permanent rose once this is dried and add the colour onto the petals in the centre, mostly, of the petals. And in between where its two petals are, one is overlapping, we'll put some darker in there. And finally we'll give it a wash over with a glaze and we will be done. It's that simple. It hasn't taken too long at all. And hopefully you'll feel accomplished once you've painted a carnation, because the rest of the months, I think February is violet, primrose or iris, I do believe. There are 3 to choose. So if there's any particular one you would like me to draw for February, let me know. January was carnations, obviously, and snowdrops. So I chose the carnation because it appears to be a difficult flower to paint. So yeah, let me know what you'd like me to go for February. And let me know if it's your birthday in February or if you are, like me, a Capricorn and this one is your flower. But yeah, irises, violets and primrose are February's birth flowers. So we've got a choice. And let me know in the comments. I'd love your input as to what you'd like to see painted. I'm also going to be painting completely different from florals. I've got a lovely picture that I've drawn. It is of a lady wandering through a dark forest. So that will be interesting, a bit enchanting, like an enchanted forest with a lady in a flowing white dress going through the forest. That will be very interesting to do, because at the moment I've done a few Christmas watercolours and obviously I've done a few florals. But yeah, that's going to be something completely different. So it's going to be a fun one, I hope. But that will be coming up in between flowers, and I'll also be doing some pastels. I've got a baby Highland cow to do a pastel painting with, and I'd like to do some acrylics as well. So yeah, keep an eye out, and if you haven't subscribed already, hit the subscribe and the bell and you won't miss any of those that I've just mentioned coming up, and we'll have fun doing those. It's going to be a packed year full of paintings. So that's enough waffling while this has dried, and I do believe it has dried. So now we're going to come into this lovely mix of permanent rose that I've got here, and I don't think I need to add any water to it. I think it's still fairly consistent. Yeah, it should be fine. So just rinse that off, otherwise I'm going to have it all up the handle. Right, okay, so to tackle this, I think again we'll begin with a small one so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Now, you should still be able to see where each of the little ruffled petals are, as it were. And for this particular carnation, the colour is banded around the centre, mostly, of each of these little ruffled petals. And there's also going to be a little bit of darkness where one petal is overlapping the other, so we'll be adding it there as well, should we need to. So, just follow along and you will soon find out what we're doing. So, to start, I'm going to start on this petal here at the front. Okay, and I am simply going to go up, down in lines, making a little jaggedy kind of band of colour. That's all I'm going to do. And we're going to come back over with another layer to darken parts of that. But for now, that is it. That's what we're doing. So now we do have to follow the contour of each petal, as it were. So for instance, this one is bending kind of down this way. So for this one, it is coming over, and then it's kind of coming down behind the little part of the bud underneath. So just like that, just jaggedy. So I'm sure that's a word. It is a word, isn't it? Okay, and then we've got a little tiny one here in between, and so you can only just see the very, very edge of that. Okay, we've got that petal that we've just done. We've got one behind, and we've got the jaggedy edge coming in there like that. We've got this central one here, and again this is coming in a curved shape, but it's behind this one here at the front. So we're just following the shapes of these little petals, and there aren't actually as many as there looks to be on the picture. So some of these back ones you can barely see any colour at all, because they are right behind these front petals. So you can just see a tiny, tiny part of them. These ones are tucked right in, so you can't see any of the pink on those ones. And we can see a little tiny bit on that one there. So there we go, just like that. And we're going to come back after, and we're going to add a tiny, tiny bit more. I might darken it a little touch, but that's it. That's what we're doing. So we've done, that one's done. Okay, for now, that one's done. So we're going to come up to this big one up here, because this one's quite interesting. This petal here is quite a large petal, and it's curving right the way around the side there, like that. So to put this colour in, we're going to start here with these kind of jaggedy lines, And we're just going to follow the shape of the petal. So here it kind of goes down there because that's open, so you can see more of the colour, if that makes sense, because it's kind of open there like that. So that's that one curling around there. And these ones are quite folded in, these little petals here, so you can only just see tiny, tiny little parts of the colour of those. We've got some that are coming under there. Let me see, we've got the base of one kind of here. And coming up to this edge, we've got one that can be seen tucked behind there. And this front one, we're just going to put a line of colour there. And this one next to it is coming up that way. And then we've got, I'm just trying to discover where I am. Okay, so we've got a shape of a petal here. So just behind it, we've got that shape of the petals behind. Okay, a little bit peeking through there and there. And if you just think that this band of colour is about halfway down each little ruffle, it will soon become quite obvious where you need to touch in this colour to separate the petals. Now over the back here we've got a few that are overlapping, so I'm just adding a little tiny touch where they are kind of overlapping there. Just a little tiny bit peeping behind that one. And that's all there is to it really. We're just putting in these tiny little lines. I'm going to come down to this one because we've got one that's, this one on the edge is kind of flopping over this way. So the centre of the ruffle would be flopping over that way. This one is curling towards us, so we can just about underneath the edge of it see a little bit of colour there, like that. And this one is tucked behind, so again pretty much like this one here, it's tucked behind here. So I'm going to put a touch of colour in there, and then we've got some kind of folded over ones in the centre here, so and it's just a case of finding the centre of these little ruffles and adding in a little touch of colour that each one has. So these ones, you can barely see it because they're tucked right up behind there, so you can only see the smallest amount tucked in there. And then just a few peeking up behind. Like that. And we've got this great big one here left. Again, we've got one that is kind of flopping over, so just putting the central edge of that we can see, and some over this way. These ones will be going over to the side. I've got quite a big one in the middle there that kind of dips down, so it will be that sort of shape. Got the underneath of this one here. And I think it's when you put these behind ones in that you can barely see the colour of that it makes the most difference. You can kind of pick out the little petals then. So like this one here, we've got one that's peeping kind of behind there. And that's it, that's all there is to it. We are going to put in some final layers though. So, this is the scary part. The glaze. Right, okay. So, we will do our glazing on our stems because they are nice and dry. And then we will finish up with a little glaze on the flowers. And then we'll be done. And it really was quite quick. I'm quite surprised how quick that went. Okay, so to do this glaze, we're going to take some of this permanent sap green that we've got left, not too much, and we're going to add it to the remainder of the Prussian blue. So you've got more of a blue. I hope you can see. Let me lift up. So this is the sap green. This is where we had the blue, and now hopefully you can see it's more of a blue than a green. It's a lovely in-between colour. Okay, to that I'm going to add some water. So I'm just going to load my brush with water and I'm going to drop it in. Now that's one brush load. Okay, and that is probably thin enough. You want a very, let me just add a little bit more. You want a little, remember this is going to be a glaze, so you're barely going to see it. It's just going to take the tone of some of this brighter green down. Okay, so it's going to be very, very watery. I hope you can see that. Not sure if this camera is going to focus. Okay, really, if I just put that into the clean well, you can see how light that is. Okay, so loading up the brush. This is the larger brush. We want to do this quite quickly because I think we'll tackle it one stem at a time. We don't want to be overlapping any of this. We want to get this on in one kind of go. So with that on my brush, I'm going to brush over everywhere on these stems. Now if you feel you've got too much on your brush, you can always dab some off onto your cloth, but kind of pick a stem and just go for it. Just start and go for it. There we go, done. I'm just going to rinse my brush off and dry it. Don't add any more water to the glaze. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of the glaze, and I'm going to do this down to here. So this top part down to here. If I feel confident enough, I'll go all the way down, but if not, stop, take a breath, and just reload. So brushing over, I'm going to go for it. And if you don't feel confident with the big brush, change down a size, okay? And if you need to rinse your brush off between, just make sure you dry it, because you don't want to be adding any more water to the glaze, okay? So we've done that one, and we've done that one. I'm going to come up here, and you'll see when this dries how it's taken the tone of everything back just a touch, just a tiny touch. This one and this one, and I'm just touching really lightly over. Don't go scrubbing, just in one stroke if you can, okay? So stroke, 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 done. Stroke, done. Okay, don't go scrubbing at it, because you will reactivate the colour underneath, and it will start shifting things about which you don't want. Okay, so stroke. I'll show you again on this bud here. Stroke, stroke, down. And because it's so transparent, we're not losing all those lovely details that we put on there before, and it's just toning down some of the areas that were a little bit bright. I mean, if you like it bright, you don't even need to do this. I just like to glaze over, because I feel it kind of finishes it off. So I'm just going over. And if you can see any parts you've missed, you can, like here, just touch that in, because I've obviously missed a little part there. And if you feel like anywhere needs an extra glaze, you can do that as well. Just be careful that you don't add too much water onto your brush. And if, like I said, if you're not confident using a big brush, swap it down a size. But you do want to try and get as much coverage in one go as you can. And that way, you haven't lost all the lovely details you put in, all the different colour shadings. And yeah, it's fab. It's one of my favourite things to do. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, for the flowers, I'm going to take a tiny bit of that permanent rose, and I'm going to put it into a different well in my palette, and I'm going to add 2 full brushes of water. So again, let me show you. So I've taken one little tiny bit of that, and I've taken 2 full brushes of water, and it is very, very watery, okay, like that. And I'm going to rinse and dry my brush on my cloth, and I'm going to pick up a tiny amount of that glaze, okay, and then really quickly I'm going to glaze over my carnation. Okay, now you don't need to do it over the whole lot. If you just want to glaze maybe just an outer leaf or some inner parts, you know, it's up to you. It really will soften those flowers down a little bit, and sometimes I'll even come back and I will lift some highlights out. Now, can you see the difference that's made? So I'm just going to sweep that glaze straight over the flower, rinsing and drying my brush off between. Pick up the last little bit. And that is done. But like I said, I'm going to show you, because I did mention it. I'm going to find my, let me see what I've got here. No, what I'm looking for is my little filbert. There it is. So this is the one I like to use to lift. This is a number 4 filbert gradulate. So what I do, if I want to lift, I take some water and take off the excess, and then if I want to create any little highlights, I will go in and I will just lift like that, rinse, take off the excess and lift anywhere that I want. A little highlight maybe on the edge where the light is catching. You can even take some kitchen towel, and I haven't got any with me here, so I'll show you with my, find a relatively clean, I do have a clean part of this cloth. See? And take some water and just show you, if I want a really light highlight, I will add with my clean damp brush and then lift like so, and that will give you a slightly lighter highlight there. So let's do that again here. Make the edge of this one a little bit lighter so it's like the sunlight is. I'll just add, dab, and it will lighten it up. You may need to go over it a couple of times. Like that. And I'll just carry on anywhere I see that I want a little highlight. I will just do that. And that's it, really. We have created our lovely little carnations. I'm going to leave that as is. And I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Like I said, if you want to watch the other ones mentioned earlier, be sure, if you haven't already subscribed, to do that. And you'll get a notification pop up when those go live. So, Happy New Year to everybody. And I will see you for February's flower next month. But until then, we'll be doing other bits and pieces. I want to do a studio vlog. I feel like I haven't done one of those for ages, and I've got lots of news to tell you. So yeah, maybe we'll fit one of those in between somewhere as well. But if you have any ideas, February's flower, like I said, violet, primrose or iris, have a Google, see which one you'd prefer me to paint, and let me know in the comments. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye!